Human stayed with the hurt alien girl until dawn, and her morning smile quietly remade him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The night had settled thick and quiet over the forest ridge when Evan Ward first saw the faint blue shimmer between the trees. At first he thought it was just bioluminescent pollen drifting on the wind, the kind that clung to tool belts and boots and made the entire frontier look like a dream. But then the shimmer moved, slower, weaker, almost collapsing into the underbrush. Evan's breath caught as his flashlight swept over her. A girl with soft blue-silver skin, leaning against a broken escape pod that had gouged a deep scar through the soil. She wasn't bleeding, but she trembled like someone fighting to stay conscious. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of his boots crunching on dry leaves. "Don't come closer," she whispered, voice thin as air. Evan froze, raising both hands slightly. "All right, I'm just making sure you're not alone out here." The temperature had dropped into the 40s, cold enough that her breath came out in faint glowing curls. She couldn't stay outside, not in her condition. Evan eased off his jacket and set it on the ground within her reach, careful not to startle her. "You can take it or leave it," he said quietly. "But the nights here bite harder than they look." For a long moment, she stared at the jacket as if it were some strange offering. Then, with a shaky exhale, she pulled it around her shoulders. That was the first thread of trust, thin, fragile, but real. Evan kept his voice low and steady. "My cabin's not far. There's heat, water, a med kit. You don't have to talk. You don't have to trust me. Just let me help you walk." She tried to stand and nearly folded, catching herself with a small gasp. Evan didn't rush in. He simply offered his arm. After a long hesitation, her cool fingers brushed his sleeve, gripping just enough to steady herself. Step by step they moved through the dark, her weight feather-light against him. Every time she stumbled, he slowed. Every time she shivered, the glow on her skin tightened like a fading pulse. When they reached his porch, she paused, studying him with wary curiosity, as if trying to understand why a stranger would stay this close, this long. "You should have left me where I fell," she murmured. Evan shook his head softly. "Yeah, I'm not really built that way." And when the cabin door opened with a warm sigh of heat, she stepped inside, not because she fully trusted him yet, but because she could feel him choosing kindness over fear, one quiet moment at a time. The warmth inside Evan Ward's cabin spread slowly, like dawn learning how to breathe. Leary stood just past the doorway, her blue-silver skin catching the soft amber glow from the heater. She held his jacket close around her shoulders, studying the room with quiet caution. Nothing in her posture was threatening, just uncertain, like someone who had spent too many nights bracing for the worst and did not quite know how to accept gentleness. Evan moved carefully, giving her space. "You can sit wherever feels safe," he said, keeping his tone low. She chose the corner of the small couch, easing down with deliberate care, her injured leg trembling as she settled. Evan knelt a few feet away, opening the battered med kit he always kept near the door. The click of metal latches seemed louder than it should have in the quiet room. He glanced up, waiting for any sign that she wanted him to stop. Instead, she watched him with steady, tired eyes, the glow along her skin dim but present. "If something hurts or feels wrong, you tell me," he said. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He worked slowly, adjusting the brace around her ankle, checking for swelling, offering water when her breathing grew uneven. Her physiology was different in subtle ways. Her pulse was faint but rhythmic. Her skin felt cooler than his hand. He kept his movements gentle, not because she looked fragile, but because something in her silence deserved respect. When he wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, she blinked at the softness as if it were unfamiliar. "This fabric," she murmured quietly, brushing it with her fingertips. "It holds warmth longer than our synthetics." "It is nothing fancy," Evan said. "Just cotton. But it does the job." Her eyes lifted to his, curious despite the exhaustion. "You stayed with me out there. Most would have left. I do not understand this choice." Evan shrugged lightly. "You were hurt. That is reason enough. She looked down, absorbing that answer as if it were a new concept. The heater hummed softly behind them. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, carrying the distant rustle of branches. Inside, time stretched slow and gentle. Leary's breathing began to ease, her shoulders settling under the blanket. For the first time, a hint of calm settled into her expression. Evan sat nearby, not touching, not crowding her, simply present. Her eyes drifted toward him again, softer this time. In my world, she said, voice low, kindness is given only when it can be repaid. You ask for nothing. Maybe that is all right, Evan replied. Maybe you do not have to repay anything tonight. She looked at him for a long moment, something unspoken shifting in her gaze. Not fear, not suspicion, something closer to relief. Her glow pulsed faintly, as if her body was finally letting itself rest. Evan reached to adjust the heater, making sure the warmth stayed steady through the night. When he glanced back, her eyes had grown heavy, but she was still awake, watching him as though trying to memorize the shape of someone who chose to stay. If you need anything, he said softly, I will be right here. Her eyes closed at last, her voice barely more than breath. Then dawn will not feel so far away. And in that quiet room, with the forest settled beyond the walls, Evan understood that staying was no longer a choice. It was simply the only thing his heart was capable of doing. The cabin stayed wrapped in that soft pre-dawn stillness, the kind that made every sound feel closer than it was. Evan Ward sat in the wooden chair beside the couch where Leary rested, his elbows on his knees, listening as her breathing settled into a gentle rhythm. She had finally fallen asleep, but even in sleep her glow pulsed faintly, rising and fading like a quiet heartbeat. Evan kept the heater on low, careful not to overwhelm her. Every so often he checked the brace on her ankle, making sure it had not shifted. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, then drifted away, leaving the world muted. Hours passed this way, slow and steady, until a soft rustle broke the stillness. Leary shifted under the blanket, her eyes blinking open as if waking from a long, heavy dream. Her gaze traveled around the room, briefly confused, until it landed on Evan. She watched him for a moment, her expression unreadable in the dim amber light. You are still here, she whispered, her voice gentle with surprise. Yeah, Evan replied, rubbing the back of his neck. I said I would be. She sat up a little, wincing when her ankle protested, and he immediately straightened, ready to steady her if she asked. She did not ask, but she did not pull away when he offered a hand to help her adjust the pillow behind her. Her fingers were cool, but steadier now. She studied him with that cautious curiosity she carried, as if she was trying to map something invisible. Do humans always stay awake this long for someone they barely know? She asked quietly. Evan let out a breath that almost counted as a laugh. I do not know about all humans. I just did not want you waking up alone. Leary held that answer, turning it over in her mind as the heater hummed. Her glow brightened slightly, not from fear, but from something warmer. She lifted her hand, brushing her fingertips against the edge of the blanket, grounding herself. Where I come from, she said softly. Presence is a gift rarely offered. Time is traded, not given. Evan met her gaze, seeing the weight beneath those words. Well, he said, nobody is trading anything here. Dawn crept slowly toward the windows, painting a pale line of light along the cabin wall. Leary noticed it first, her eyes tracking the soft shift in color. She leaned back, exhaustion still present, but no longer overwhelming. Your world wakes gently, she murmured. Mine rises fast, sharp, like a command. Evan glanced toward the window. This place takes its time. You can too. She hesitated, then exhaled, letting her shoulders relax into the blanket. For the first time, she seemed to allow the safety around her to exist without questioning it. Her eyes returned to him, studying the lines of his tired face, the patience in his posture, the quiet steadiness he carried without thinking. Evan, she said softly, testing the shape of his name. You stayed. He nodded once. A simple truth. A small moment. But something in her expression shifted, subtle as the morning light. Not a smile yet, but the beginning of one, held gently inside her eyes. And Evan, watching her breathe easier in the glow of the coming day, realized that this quiet moment, this small, fragile bit of trust, felt like the first warmth after a long winter. The pale line of dawn had barely settled across the cabin walls when Leary shifted, drawing a slow breath as if testing the air. Evan Ward noticed the subtle change first, the way her glow warmed slightly along her shoulders. He rose from the chair, stretching stiff muscles that had been locked in place for hours. The heater hummed steadily, filling the room with a soft warmth that pushed back the cold. "How is the ankle feeling?" he asked gently. Leary studied it, flexing her foot with careful precision. "Less pressure," she murmured. "It is manageable." Her tone held surprise, as if her own recovery was something she did not expect. Evan crouched down, checking the brace without touching her skin. "You should not walk on it yet," he said. "But we can make it easier." Leary watched him, her eyes tracing the movements of his hands as he adjusted the straps. Her glow steadied, like a quiet signal of trust she was still learning how to give. When he finished, she shifted upright, leaning slightly on the arm of the couch. "May I stand?" she asked. Evan paused, considering her posture. "Only for a moment," he said, "and I will be right here." She nodded, placing her hands on the couch as she tried to lift herself. Her balance wavered, but Evan steadied her with a hand beneath her elbow, guiding rather than holding. Leary's breath caught at the sensation of standing. It was not perfect. It was not painless. But it was hers, and it was progress. She looked at him, her silver blue eyes reflecting the new light creeping through the windows. "Your world feels different in the morning," she said quietly. "It feels safe." Evan's chest tightened at the word. Safe was something he had not felt in a long time either. "It is just a small clearing in the woods," he said. "Nothing special." "You think that," she whispered. "But it is the first place where I have woken without fear." The heater clicked softly, marking the moment with a gentle reminder that time was moving forward. Evan guided her back to the couch, letting her settle with a slow exhale. She looked toward the window, watching the sky brighten. "My people rise with orders," she said. "We begin with assignments, objectives, lists of what must be completed before the second hour." Evan leaned against the edge of the table, arms folded loosely. "And what about you?" She considered the question, as if it had never been asked of her. "I rise with expectations," she said. "Ones I do not always understand. Ones I was not always able to meet." Evan nodded, not pressing. He could see the weight resting between her words. She traced the blanket with thoughtful fingertips, absorbing its softness. "But here," she said quietly, "I woke because light reached my eyes. Nothing else." Evan felt something shift in the room, delicate but real. Not a confession, not a bond, just a shared gentleness in the early light. "Breakfast?" he offered, breaking the silence with a small smile. "I cannot promise it will impress you, but it will be warm." Leary looked at him, a faint spark in her expression. "Warm," she repeated softly. "I think I would like that." And as he turned toward the small kitchen, her glow brightened just enough to cast a faint silver reflection across the walls, like the morning itself had decided to settle inside the cabin with them. The morning settled fully over the clearing by the time Evan Ward finished preparing breakfast. The scent of warm oatmeal and a hint of cinnamon drifted through the small kitchen, mixing with the cool forest air that slipped through the cracked window. He moved quietly, aware of every small sound in the cabin, aware of the injured girl resting on the couch behind him. When he carried the bowl over, Leary lifted her head, her blue-silver glow softening in the daylight. She accepted the bowl with both hands, studying the rising steam as if it were a phenomenon she had never encountered before. "This is simple earth food," Evan said. "Nothing complicated." She touched the edge of the bowl, then looked up at him. "It carries warmth," she murmured, "in more ways than one." He sat beside the small table across from her, giving her plenty of space as she took a cautious bite. Her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "It is gentle," she said. "Our sustenance is efficient, but not comforting." Evan smiled slightly. "Comfort matters, especially on mornings like this." She nodded, absorbing the idea as though it were a new rule of the universe. While she ate, her eyes drifted across the cabin, taking in the shelves of worn tools, the faded map pinned to the wall, the stack of repair manuals scattered by the radio. Her gaze lingered on each object as if she was piecing together the shape of his life. "You live alone," she observed softly. "Yes," he replied. "For a while now. By choice." The question hung in the air. Evan considered his answer, then shrugged. Maybe partly. And partly because life has its way of narrowing down what is left. She seemed to understand more in the silence that followed than any long explanation could have offered. Her glow brightened just a little, a quiet sign of empathy. When she finished eating, Evan took the bowl, moving carefully so she would not feel rushed. Leary shifted on the couch, adjusting the blanket around her. She glanced toward the window where sunlight filtered through the trees in thin gold lines. Your world wakes in colors, she said. Where I come from, morning is announced through resonance tones broadcast across our structures. They guide us toward our duties. Sounds strict, Evan said. It sounds tiring. She tilted her head, considering the word. Tiring, she repeated softly. Yes, it is. A small breeze brushed the window pane, carrying the gentle sound of leaves stirring. Leary turned toward the sound with quiet fascination. This world breathes, she whispered. And it does not tell you what you must be each hour. Evan leaned against the table, watching her take in the shifting light. Out here, he said, you set your own pace, your own direction. Her eyes lingered on him then, searching deeper than before, as if the idea of choosing her own pace was something she had never been allowed to imagine. And if I do not know my direction? She asked. Then you start with one step, Evan replied. Just one. You took it this morning when you stood. She lowered her gaze, but a quiet spark moved across her expression, soft as dawn. One step, she echoed. Perhaps that is enough for now. Evan nodded, sensing the truth settling gently between them. In the quiet cabin, with sunlight warming the wooden floor and the forest humming softly beyond the walls, it felt like the beginning of something neither of them had expected. A morning shaped not by orders or fear, but by small choices, slow breaths, and the delicate rebuilding of trust. The late morning light drifted across the cabin in slow golden bands, warming the wooden floor and catching the faint silver glow along Leary's skin. Evan Ward cleared the breakfast dishes, moving with quiet rhythm, aware that every sound seemed sharper when she was listening. She sat upright now, supported by the couch cushions, studying the room with an attention that felt half analytical, half wondering, as if she was learning how the world worked by observing the smallest details. When Evan returned, she looked toward him, her gaze curious. Your routines, she said softly. They have a calmness to them. Evan chuckled under his breath. That is one way to put it. Some would call it boring. Leary tilted her head. Boring is a luxury where I come from. He leaned against the edge of the table, crossing his arms loosely. Tell me about your routines. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the blanket as if grounding herself before speaking. At first light, we receive assignments. Navigation training, data modeling, structural resonance calculations. Every hour is measured. Every task contributes to the collective. Evan nodded slowly. And what about you personally? What did you like to do? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She stared at him, then lowered her eyes. Personal preference is not a concept we practice. My role was chosen before I could speak. Evan felt a weight settle in his chest, a soft ache that had nothing to do with himself. Do you ever think about choosing? She looked toward the window where a thin breeze stirred the leaves. I do not know how, she said. Not yet. Silence drifted in, gentle and unforced. The forest hummed quietly beyond the walls, a reminder that the world outside did not demand anything from her in this moment. After a while, Leary shifted, adjusting her injured ankle. May I ask you something? Evan nodded. Anything. Why did you bring me here instead of alerting your authorities? Her voice held no accusation, only a need to understand. Evan let out a slow breath. Because you were hurt. Because you looked scared. Because sometimes the right thing is not the official thing. She studied him with a depth that made the room feel smaller, warmer. I was taught that humans act for advantage, she said quietly. That they value gain above all else. Evan raised an eyebrow. And what do you think now? Leary did not answer immediately. Her glow brightened slightly, almost like a softening of emotion, gentle and cautious. I think, she said carefully, that you are not what I was taught. Evan felt something shift inside him, subtle but undeniable. Not a grand revelation, just a small, steady thread of connection pulling taut between them. He pulled a chair closer, not too close, and sat where she could see him without strain. For what it is worth, he said, you are not what I expected either. Her eyes lifted to his, silver catching the warm morning light. What did you expect? He shrugged lightly. Maybe someone who would not trust me at all. Someone who would stay silent and guarded. Leary exhaled slowly, a breath that seemed to release a tension she had carried for far too long. I am trying, she whispered. Not to be guarded. You are doing fine, Evans said. More than fine. She absorbed that, her expression softening in a way that carried more meaning than words could hold. The heater clicked softly in the background, and the forest outside stirred like a gentle reminder that time was still moving. But inside the cabin, everything felt suspended, held in a fragile balance of warmth and quiet understanding. And for the first time since she arrived, Leary's glow steadied fully, calm and even, as if something inside her had finally begun to trust the stillness. The forest outside shifted with a quiet unease as afternoon settled in, a low hum in the branches that did not belong to the wind. Evan Ward noticed it first, the way birds fell silent, the way the air seemed to tighten as if holding its breath. Inside the cabin, Leary rested with her hands folded lightly over the blanket, her glow steady but soft. She looked calmer than she had since the crash, but something in the air tugged at Evan's instincts. He crossed to the window, pushing the curtain aside just enough to scan the tree line. Nothing visible, just stillness, a strange stillness. Leary watched him with growing concern. Something troubles you, she said. Her voice was gentle, but her posture straightened subtly, as if bracing for an answer she already sensed. Evan exhaled slowly. The woods are quiet. Too quiet. Leary's glow flickered, a sign of alertness rather than fear. My vessel emitted a distress pulse when it ruptured, she said. It is possible that others detected it. Evan turned back toward her, steady but serious. Your people. She hesitated. Not necessarily mine. That answer settled heavily between them. Evan's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from concern. Leary shifted, trying to sit taller despite the brace on her ankle. If someone is searching, I do not wish to bring danger to your home. Evan shook his head immediately. You are not leaving. You can barely stand. Leary looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and conflict. Your care is kind, but I cannot let harm fall on you because of me. Nobody is getting harmed, Evan said, keeping his tone calm. We are just staying alert. That is all. Leary's eyes softened, though worry lingered like a shadow behind them. The cabin grew quiet again, but now it was an attentive quiet, every sound measured. Evan moved through the room with purpose, checking the radio, adjusting the heater, making sure the locks were set, not out of fear but preparation. Leary watched him, her expression shifting between admiration and concern. Humans, she murmured, are not as fragile as I was taught. Evan huffed a quiet laugh. We manage. She traced a faint line across the blanket, a thoughtful gesture. You stay calm even when you are uncertain. Someone has to, Evan replied. Then he realized the truth behind his own words. He was staying calm because she needed him to. Because her glow dimmed every time her thoughts spiraled toward danger. Because her trust in him, fragile as it was, felt like something worth protecting. A faint chime sounded from outside, soft and metallic, carried by the breeze. Leary's head turned sharply toward the sound. Evan froze. What was that? He asked. Leary's glow thinned, her breathing shifting. A proximity scan, she whispered. Not human. Evan felt a cold knot form low in his chest, but he stepped closer to her, not away. You are safe here, he said quietly. Whoever it is, whatever they want, you are not facing it alone. Leary looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of fear. Instead, she found steady resolve, warm and unwavering. Her glow brightened softly, not from fear, but from something else, something like trust deepening. Evan, she said, her voice barely above a breath. I do not understand why you choose this. He met her eyes gently. Because sometimes the right thing is simply staying. The metallic chime echoed again in the distance, faint but real. But inside the cabin, a fragile sense of calm held firm, anchored by 2 breaths, 2 steady heartbeats, and a promise that neither had spoken aloud yet both could feel. The metallic chime faded into the trees, leaving a thin hush suspended over the clearing as if the entire forest was listening. Evan Ward stepped closer to the window, careful not to disturb the curtain. He saw nothing but shifting branches and pale afternoon light, yet something beyond the tree line pulsed with quiet intention. Leary watched him, her glow drawn tight along her arms, not bright from fear, but sharpened by recognition. I know that frequency, she whispered. It is a seeker sweep. It scans for biosignatures. Evan turned back toward her, his voice steady. Does it know you are here? Not yet, she said. But it will if it comes within 40 yards. Evan's mind moved quickly, tracing the layout of the cabin, the depth of the woods, the distance to the old utility shed behind the clearing. He was not planning an escape. He was planning how to keep her calm. You said this might not be your people, he said. Why would anyone else be searching? Leary lowered her eyes. The answer weighed on her, heavy enough that her glow dimmed in the space of a breath. Because I was carrying information, she said softly. Information not all factions agree should be shared. Evan kept his voice even. Are you in danger? Not from my own, she said, but from those who believe knowledge must be controlled. She looked up at him, silver blue eyes reflecting the low cabin light. If they found me, they would not harm me, but they would take me, and they would erase everything I have learned since falling here. Evan felt a tightness in his chest at the thought of her being dragged back into a life stripped of choice. Her voice quieted, her glow dimmed under orders she never chose. We are not letting that happen, he said gently. Leary blinked at the word we, a small shift in her gaze that carried more meaning than he intended. Evan, she whispered, you are risking too much for someone you met only hours ago. He shook his head. Not someone. You. For a moment she did not breathe. The air between them felt warm, fragile, real. The quiet outside broke again, a faint rising hum that brushed the cabin walls like a distant echo. Leary straightened, instinct pulling her upright despite her injury. Evan moved to steady her, hands light on her arms. Easy, he murmured. Do not strain yourself. I must be prepared, she said, though her balance wavered. I cannot hide behind you. You are not hiding, Evan replied. You are recovering. She looked at him, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. I do not understand humans, she said softly. You help without gain. You stay without command. My people do not choose like this. Evan offered a small, tired smile. Maybe this is just what people do when someone needs them. Leary's glow softened, spreading gently across her collarbones, warm and steady like dawn light settling on water. She held his gaze with quiet intensity. There is something you must know, she said, before any seeker finds us. Evan nodded once. Tell me. She drew a slow breath, gathering strength. I am not only a navigator. I am what your people might call a cartographer of gravitational routes. My mind holds maps that have not yet been charted. Maps that can change travel across entire systems. The weight of her words settled between them, not frightening but profound. Evan exhaled. So you really are important. Not important, she said. Just useful to those who want to control movement. And dangerous to those who fear freedom. Evan looked toward the window again, listening to the faint hum drifting through the trees. Then let us make sure they do not find you. Leary watched him with a quiet, widening recognition, as if she finally saw the truth she had been circling all along. Evan, she whispered, you do not know how rare your choices are. He turned back to her, voice steady. Maybe, but I know they are mine. Outside, the hum drifted away, hinting that the seeker had passed for now. Inside, the cabin felt warmer, the light softer, as if the moment itself held its breath around them, waiting for what would come next. The seeker's fading hum dissolved into the distant canopy, leaving the clearing wrapped in a fragile quiet that felt almost unreal. Evan Ward held still by the window, listening for any sign the sweep might return. When none came, he released a slow breath and turned back toward Leary. Her glow had softened again, no longer tightened by alarm, but shaped by something quieter, something that lived between relief and reflection. She watched him with a calm, steady gaze, as if memorizing the way he stood in that slant of afternoon light. It has passed, she murmured, sensing the shift in the air even before he confirmed it. Evan nodded, moving back to the center of the room. For now, he said, but if it comes again, we will handle it. Leary held his eyes, her expression warm and grateful, yet carrying a depth he had not seen before. You speak as if you have always known how to face uncertainty, she said. Evan shrugged gently. Nobody really knows. You just do the next right thing and hope it counts for something. She absorbed that, her glow pulsing softly with every breath she took. Something unguarded lived in her posture now, a quiet ease that had not been there the night before. "Evan," she said, her voice low, "there is one truth I have not spoken yet." He pulled a chair closer and sat where she could meet his eyes without straying. "I am listening." Leary rested her hands on the blanket, fingers laced lightly. "My maps," she began. "The ones I carry in my mind, they are not only routes. They are predictions. They show where gravitational lines will shift years from now, where safe passage will open or close. If misused, they could shape entire systems. They could restrict movement or open borders that were never meant to be open." Evan's brows drew together gently. "So what you know could change the future?" She nodded, her expression steady but solemn. "Yes, and that is why some would silence it, and why others would imprison it. Knowledge that changes the shape of space is not allowed to belong to just one person." Evan leaned forward slightly. "But it does belong to you." Leary blinked, her glow brightening faintly. "No one has ever said that to me." "It is the truth," Evan said quietly. She looked down, her voice softening. "When my vessel ruptured and I fell toward this world, I believed everything was ending, that I would never rise again under my own choice." Her eyes lifted to his, gentle and luminous. "But you changed that. Not by force, not by demand, but by presence." Evan felt something settle deep inside his chest, warm and steady. He did not speak, but she seemed to feel the words he held back. "The dawn," she continued, "felt different because you were near. My people do not understand such things, but I am beginning to." Evan reached out, not touching her hand, just placing his own beside hers on the blanket, letting the closeness speak for him. Leary studied their hands, the distance of a breath between them, and exhaled slowly. Her glow shifted, becoming softer, gentler, almost like a quiet echo of morning light. Outside, the last traces of the seeker hum faded entirely, leaving only the forest's calm breath against the window. Leary lifted her gaze to Evan, and for the first time since she arrived, a true smile formed across her face. Small, delicate, real. It was not bright or dramatic. It did not need to be. It was a dawn unto itself. Evan felt the world narrow to that one expression, a quiet reminder of everything he had tried to protect. Her smile held gratitude, hope, and something new, something that reshaped the room, reshaped him. In the soft light of the cabin, with the danger slipping back into the distant trees, Leary's smile lingered in the space between them, gentle and transformative, as if the simple act of being seen had finally allowed her to breathe freely. And in that still moment, Evan realized that he had not only helped her stand. In some small, unexpected way, she had helped him rise too.